Megaman or Riot, and welcome back to Fair Game. In today's episode of our Megaman Soccer Run, we are going to be taking on Needleman. Needleman is the favorite robot master of many people, and with good reason. His portrayal in both the Archie comics and the Megas song, The Haystack Principle, both portray him as a deeply sympathetic villain, which is kind of rare in this series. His motivation in both of these is, frankly, that he was built to be a war machine. There's intentional lines drawn between him and both Crashman and Airman, who his design happens to be based off. However, whereas Airman was angry and wrathful, Needleman is tortured, despising what he is. Both such appearances are actually based on his data CD from Megaman and Base. Needleman in Megaman Soccer isn't quite so much of an awesome character, but he does make for an absolutely awesome halfback. With his high kick stat and relatively high defensive stats, he also makes for a damn good goalie. In addition, he also has a pretty good super shot. He has a bit of a rivalry with Dustman going on. Dustman has a slightly better super shot and is slightly harder to steal from, but has a much lower tackle stat in exchange. Overall, Needleman usually isn't a terribly hard match. I mean, you saw me score in like the first 30 seconds, so you have a general idea of how easy this one's going to be. Still, even with that, he can actually be a lot tougher than you'd think. He's actually a bit faster than Woodman and Pharaohman, which gives him the advantage of being able to easily catch up to players he otherwise wouldn't be able to. In fact, through chain sliding, he can easily catch up to any Robot Master that has 42 or less speed. This actually means that Electman is in the perfect position to both keep and maintain a lead against him. Needleman is also one of only 3 Robot Masters in the entire game with 64 kick. While this improvement is almost insignificant, it does mean he can both kick a little bit harder and kick a little bit further. Needleman's stage is actually one of the more interesting ones, having an appearance that calls to mind a brick patio covered in sand. It also features a really cute cameo. In one of the parking lots, if you take a closer look, Shadowman's sitting in one of the convertibles. Presumably there to cheer on Needleman. I can kind of see those two working together. Speaking of Mega Man 3, do you know how I mentioned Needleman's stage in the Megas earlier? Pretty much all of the Megas songs designed for Mega Man 3 are fantastic and highly recommended. More recently, they've dipped their toes into the water doing a song from Mega Man 4, specifically Skullman's stage. So here's to hoping we'll see more of it in the future. Needleman's actually never been all that big as far as official works go. To the best of my knowledge, the only other 2 games he's appeared in are Super Adventure Rockman, which is the FMV game, and Mega Man 2 on Game Boy. He did appear in the Ruby Spears cartoon, and he was voiced by Gary Chalk there. Chalk was also the voice of Gutsman. Chalk did his voice intentionally referencing Grounder from The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, who he also did. The voice does sort of work, considering the fact that Chalk decided to portray him as less stupid than Grounder, not that such a thing is difficult. In the Mega Man Megamix and Gigamix comics, he's actually got a pretty interesting portrayal there too. He's got these belt-fed autoloaders for his needles, and it makes him look way more threatening. Interestingly, Needleman is also the inspiration behind my favorite Robot Master of all time, Napalm Man. Idly, if you've been wondering why I put Mega Man in my goal as opposed to Woodman, it's because Woodman is vulnerable to this particular super shot. I do find it both interesting and mildly silly that Needleman's goalie happens to be bright pink. Right there, you have a Robot Master that's perfectly comfortable standing out. He doesn't care that he's in Mega Man Soccer. He's going to own every second of it. As you can see, the speed advantage when using literally anybody but Electman is much less pronounced against this particular Robot Master. This is also true of both Airman and Dustman, though Airman can actually catch Electman. I do find it interesting that Needleman's stage seems to have hung up Mega Man banners for some reason. So either Needleman's a really good sport about this whole thing, or he's secretly a Mega Man team fan. Or Shadowman is. Maybe that's why he's in the car. He's not even here to watch Needleman, he's here to watch Mega Man. Ouch, that's kinda harsh. While Needleman and Cutman can both affect very different things as far as their super shot is concerned, and have different shot styles, they both basically do the same thing. On impact, it cuts the player it hits to pieces. For something so obviously cartoony, there's something really, really violent about how they do it. So if nothing else, I'm hoping you guys get a chance to see it during this particular match. You know, I remember when I was playing Mega Man 3 when I was little, I noticed 2 things immediately about Needleman's stage. That it had no spikes in it, at least until the second time through it, and that it was really, really hard. Like nowadays, I have no trouble beating that game on my own, but when I was younger, yeah, Mega Man 3 was pretty hard. I've been told that Needleman has a spirit in Smash Ultimate, but I've never actually gotten it, so I can't confirm or deny if that's the case. I wonder if Needleman was in Mega Man Battle Network. I'll have to ask Neil about that one. Speaking of Neil, he actually brought something up earlier that I completely spaced on. During episode 3 of our run, also known as the Woodman episode, I brought up the subject of Captain N and shows like it, and how a lot of the comedy sketches that they used at the time they could never get away with today on modern television. I said there was 2 in particular that stuck out at me, but due to time constraints and the fact that I was so unfocused, I only really got into one of them. Before I continue, I gotta explain, the Zelda cartoon had lots of these. A hell of a lot of them. And almost all of them were centered on the same theme, namely Sprite, the fairy character of the show, flirting with Link somehow. During one of the first episodes, Sprite explains that Zelda is a stuck-up snot and that Link should go with her instead, to which Link responds by pointing out that Sprite is like 5 inches tall. At this point, with a double entendre that somehow managed to slip past the network censors, Sprite responds, "What, you don't like short girls?" That is, as we say in the business, a joke for dads. It's actually funny because the Zelda cartoon had a lot of these, and while I won't go so far as to say they were in every episode, there was a lot of them if you went looking for them. There was another episode later in the series where Link was complaining about some asshat that Zelda had taken an interest in. Sprite then replied by saying she liked Link just the way he was, and then, noticing he was in the bathtub, added, "especially at the moment." People often wondered why Neil and I reference so many terrible old cartoons from the 1980s and early 90s. It's because they had their moments, and these are those moments. Back on the subject of both Megaman and things I said in previous episodes, however, did you know that the terrible box art for the original Mega Man, as well as the one for Mega Man 2, are the way they are for the exact same reason that the Captain N Mega Man 2 Robot Masters are as screwed up looking as they are? I am neither joking nor exaggerating about this. The reason that the North American cover for the first Mega Man game turned out so bad is because the artist of the cover was asked to create it with basically no time before the game was released and had never viewed any of the source material or seen the game, thus creating the cover that has almost nothing to do with said game. This is also something that happened over and over again, not only with the North American release of Mega Man 2, but with pretty much every European cover in the Mega Man series. Of course, by this point in the series, Capcom just does it on purpose, since they're now fully in on the joke. Interestingly, there was a Mega Man event for Monster Hunter X, and by doing it, you could unlock a set of Mega Man armor for your Palco. What's especially interesting is, it would play different music depending on what equipment you were using at the time. For example, my friend Rode was using the Xenojiva hammer, so it was playing Gutsman's theme. For me, I was wearing full Death Stench set and using a katana, and it was playing the theme from Skullman's stage. Of the AAA developers that survived the console wars and are still around to this day, I'd actually say Capcom is pretty much my favorite. Because despite their numerous screw-ups, they still care about their customers first and foremost, and are at least willing to admit when they've made mistakes. Something to be said for— oh, there's the needle shot! That is so goddamn violent. Which is ironic, as it has one of the shorter stun times of a super shot. We're doing quite well at the moment, rapidly closing on the end of the half. While Needleman hasn't scored on our team so far, it's a folly to think that they won't eventually. Even barring their second super shot potentially being used, the computer-controlled Needleman AI likes to group up, as you've already seen. Alright, halftime. When setting up your formations, I highly recommend you actually kit to counterplay. For example, if you know that your opponents are going to be light on the offense because they chose the sweeper formation, you may want to counter by using the 2-2-3 formation. Alternately, you can try to meet them head-on and try to break through with 3-2-2 or 3-1-3. The same is true in reverse. If you know the opponent's going heavy offense with 3-2-2, you can either meet them head-on with 2-2-3, or try to take advantage of their weaker end zone with 3-2-2 your own. There's a credible argument to be made that 2-3-2 and 3-1-3 are the most powerful formations. 3-1-3 maximizes both your offense and defense, but has the obvious downside of basically starving your halfbacks. And halfbacks are actually some of the most important players in the game. When you're doing an offensive push or trying to lock things down on defense, either way the halfbacks get called in. That's why 2-3-2 is so important, because it maximizes the number of halfbacks you have in that critical position. Sweeper is probably one of my favorite formations. It's defensive and somewhat similar to 2-2-3, but takes the central player from the 3 formation and moves him back closer to the goal in a special sweeper position. This helps alleviate pressure on the goalkeeper and is a major reason why this is such a useful formation. The other reason is that during multiplayer it offers an additional slot for you to play with. This gives you one other robot master that you can specifically customize regardless of who they are, and ergo add a little bit more variety to your team. While this isn't too useful in most situations, it is enough to at least get a bit more customization out of your team, and that's always a good thing. Man, is it a bad sign that I know as much as I do about soccer because of Nintendo World Cup and Megaman Soccer? Seriously, these two games were responsible for getting me into enjoying soccer. And while I don't think you're ever going to catch me playing a FIFA game, I did enjoy watching the absolute nonsense that was this year's World Cup. Though I think part of that is the two teams nobody expected to win just sweeping in and kicking everyone's ass. Good job, France and Croatia. I suppose this just goes to prove something that James Rolfe once said. Doesn't matter whether you're a sports nerd or you're a video game nerd, you're still a nerd at the end of the day. Alright, do you remember how I said earlier that halfbacks were really important and how there was a downside to not properly using them? Right there in real time, you're actually seeing one of the downsides in action right there. Traditionally, once you start to move the ball upfield, the halfbacks will move in to try to keep the ball pushing upwards. However, in this case, using the 3-1-3 formation, Farrowman has pushed up all the way from halfway across the field. This has forced the fullbacks to move up to fill the void, and in turn, has opened up a fairly substantial dead zone in the right side of my field. Now, I was lucky here. I used 2-2-3 instead of 3-1-3, so I was able to distribute a little bit more evenly. But if I was using 3-1-3, pulling Farrowman forward would have immediately opened me up to problems. God, it's so weird learning about actual sports through a game that doesn't really have too much to do with sports otherwise. Also, I find it very interesting that soccer fandom is one of the few unifying traits regardless of country. And while it doesn't have anywhere near the stateside presence that it does in other countries, it's still got a pretty goddamn substantial fan base here in the States. God, Electman Super Shot is good. I reiterate what I said about Mega Man Soccer earlier. The game is a lot of fun to watch, and it's a lot of fun to play, but actually commentating on it is actually kind of difficult because it's kind of like trying to commentate on a Command & Conquer match. There's an old Penny Arcade strip from 2007 about the Command & Conquer book series, where Tycho jokes that he was originally tapped to write the manuscript, but that his version got rejected because his version could be basically surmised with, and then the Tiberium Harvester returned to the refinery. That's actually a really good analogy for why I don't do play-by-play in these usually. Instead, choosing humorous asides and other random bits of idiocy for you to enjoy. Someone's been enjoying them. I can credibly say it's some of the best content I've created so far. If you take a look, you can actually see the Farrowman situation starting to unfold again on the right side of the field. That keeps happening because, as you can see, I've been really aggressively pushing, and that's causing the rest of my team to push upwards in response. Anyway, oh, damn it. God damn it, Needleman. It's going to take all day for Dr. Light to program another Mega Man goalie. One thing I really do like about Mega Man Soccer is its speed. It's a lot more flowing and a lot more fluid than Nintendo World Cup was. It definitely needed a couple of more months in the oven, though. Like, I'd seriously love to mod the hell out of this game and see if I can make a much better version of it for everyone to enjoy. Unfortunately, I think the game is just too spaghetti-coated for me to try that. There's just too many cracks in the system, basically. The goalies are a great example of the problems that are in this game. They can stop basically any casual shot attempt, but if you take an angled shot from the top or bottom of the box, it'll almost always go in because the goalie can't track it properly. Otherwise, your only real score chances are to either bludgeon the goalie out of the way by repeatedly doing bank shots, using rapid passes in order to get the ball to a better spot right before the goalie has the chance to respond, or using a goddamn super shot. Worth noting, if you do actually tie with your opponent by the end of the game, you'll go into a shootout. Both players will take turns shooting at one another's goals. You get 5 shots, and whoever has the highest score at the end wins. If you want to basically cheat at this against the computer and guarantee that you win, have your goalie imitate DJ Paraplegic and stay absolutely motionless. If the comp chooses to shoot straight, which most of the time it will, your goalie will automatically stop the shot because it was in the right space. Otherwise, the whole shebang is a crapshoot, and in fact, when you're playing multiplayer, the whole thing is. The most points I've ever scored in this game was, if I remember correctly, around 10-2. I was playing League mode and using Electman's team, which means I actually started with a Dr. Wily for once. We were going up against Skullman's team, and I just absolutely rolled him at the time. This, of course, was before I discovered the fine art that is angled shotting. So nowadays, I'm mostly sure that I could do much better than that. Much, much better, in fact. I may do a little bit of League mode after I go through this game. I don't know yet. If I do eventually do a League run, I'm going to have to decide on whose team I'm going to use. Skullman's team is the obvious choice, but there's a lot of other choices you can use. Dustman and Electman have by far the strongest teams in League. Electman's League team consists of 3 Electman, 2 Gemini Man, 2 Snake Man, and a Dr. Wily. That makes it terrifyingly good on offense. Dustman's team is its defensive counterpart with 3 Dustmen, 2 Airmen, 2 Snakemen, and a Dr. Wily. To contrast, Skullman's team consists of 3 Skullmen, 2 Bombmen, 2 Flashman, and Protoman. That's actually interesting because that's a team that you can actually make using the creation rules that I mentioned earlier. It is a bit heavy on the offensive side, but Bombman makes for a decent goalie, so I might be able to go the distance with that one. It'll be interesting to see. Okay, hold on. Can I score a last-minute shot right on the goal? Can I do it? All right, let's try and... Oh, come on, that totally went in. No, I'm totally not bitter about this. Let's just take our Needleman and go. Anyway, thank you for watching this episode of Fair Game, and tune in next time when we'll be taking on Fireman.